begin. All right.
Sorry, whoops.
No problem, no problem. All right, good afternoon. Welcome one and all to our Secret Sauce panel discussion brought to you by Forward Comms on how to make a movement and not a moment in the UAE restaurant industry. My name is Georgie. I'm a journalist and public speaker based in Dubai. I've done my fair share of moderating panel discussions, but this is my first time biting into this particular topic. So we do not have a shortage of dining options in the UAE. In Dubai alone, there were 11,813 restaurants at the end of 2018. I'm sure now we are well over the 12,000 mark. So it's safe to say it's pretty crowded, and it's also the primary form of entertainment because it's an evergreen activity here. We don't have to wait till November to enjoy it like we do with outdoor pursuits. So there's a lot of pressure to get it right. But these guys here with me have done something right and are well appointed to weigh in on the topic on how to make a movement and not just a moment in the UAE restaurant industry. So I'm going to introduce everybody. Luma Makhlouf, who is the co-founder and creator of Maiz Tacos. Up until yesterday, I was pronouncing it Maiz Tacos, so if you have, you're wrong as well. We then have Gerschel, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Loud Table, based in Dubai. It's a hospitality investment company based in the Gulf and acts as an incubator for the region. And then we have Tom Arnel, who is the founder and managing director of Bull & Roo. You're probably all familiar with some of their brands like Tom and Surge and Common Grounds, among many others. So before we tuck in, I have a few housekeeping points to make. We are talking about the restaurant industry, which is a very emotive industry, which wouldn't be complete if we didn't pepper the conversation with expletives. So if you do have small children in your immediate vicinity, silent auditorium, don't remove them because it will invariably get pretty heated. And secondly, this discussion will be about 45 minutes long, followed by a Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to ask them or pivot off something that they've said in the talk, please reserve your questions. Don't be shy. Please put it in the box below where it says Q&A, and I'll get to it as quick as possible. So you all occupy a significant part of the restaurant industry, both here and in the region. Can you each tell us a little bit about how you established yourselves in the UAE restaurant scene? Tom, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Georgie, and hello, everyone. Hi, Andre. Hi, Luma. Hope you're doing well, and everyone listening and watching. So, wow, it's been 10 years since I've been in the UAE. I came out here as the executive chef for Jones the Grocer, which is an Australian cafe gourmet brand. And we opened 7 venues for them successfully over about 3 years. So it was a pretty amazing growth period, which at that time was not unheard of because Dubai was mostly built on franchises and out-of-towners coming in and just injecting robotic crap into the scene, which was frustrating the hell out of me, like crazy, because I knew that if we did things in a good, energetic, entrepreneurial type way in Dubai and focus on quality, focus on being different, I knew that it would work. So in 2020, what year was it? 2013. We had the idea to create a cafe in the industrial area called Tom and Surge, and the rest is history. It was a pretty crazy success at the time, and we did something incredibly ambitious in an area where I don't think anyone really expected us to do it, and it set me up for what we have today, which is now 250 employees and 6 restaurants and an online bakery brand, Encounter Coffee, which is now our new QSR coffee brand, which we're growing, and a lot of other things in the pipeline. So that's me.
Luma, how about you?
Yeah, so I got into F&B with my husband. It was a big passion of ours, and we wanted to find a way to get into it. Had no idea which direction we were going in, and we decided to go the mobile route and worked with some teams to figure out how to launch a food truck. And we explored that idea for quite a while, about 5 years ago, I want to say, and it just wasn't happening. So we waited around, did our research, and finally we just studied Mexican food, you know, every single day, just trying to figure out how we could perfect it, but stay true to using the highest quality of ingredients out there, but remaining authentic, which we didn't really at that time see much people doing what was happening in the States, where I grew up in a, you know, Mexican community like taquerias. There just wasn't anything like it here. So we launched the food truck, and soon after launched our catering branch and kiosks to start reaching you know, new demographics and more people in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, other Emirates with events. So we were very mobile for a while. And then we did some pop-up branches. We did one in Jumeirah, which did very well, and decided to finally, you know, open up our first flagship, which is in JLT now, where we just celebrated 1 year there. And also opened up another brand, which is doing very well, called Good Burger. And it started through COVID. And it picked up, it was just a delivery brand just to help us survive. And soon after, we moved into a cloud kitchen and accepted dine-ins as well. And yeah, now we're growing both brands simultaneously.
Amazing. Andre?
First of all, tough act to follow with those two. But I moved to Dubai about 10 years ago. And my first job off of the A380 boat, so to speak, was with a Japanese restaurant called Oku, which was like a Japanese supper club in the H Hotel at the time. And I moved from there to Jumeirah Group and did all of the Caprice brands. So I was working with Rivington and the Ivy. And that was an unbelievable experience to go from sort of independent restaurants to hotel restaurants. Did some work with food trucks in the very, very, very beginning. I don't know if you guys remember Moti Roti. Do you guys remember Moti Roti from back in the day?
Yeah, I do.
It was so good, and run by a totally passionate owner. And that was sort of like, that was back, I think, when it was in like sort of right market-ish territory. Did some fun work with the guys from Brown Book, Ahmed and Rashid and Shabib, on their physical spaces. And then I got like the craziest call in the world by my mentor, who was the woman that ran Baker and Spice. And she said, listen, I'm retiring in a week. Do you want the gig? And it was literally like that. That was like the call. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? And I was a week away from opening up a place that I wanted to take in the H Hotel, on the lobby, actually where, what's it called? Burgundy Lion or Black Lion restaurant space. I was really wanting that space. And so I decided to take a pivot, and instead of opening up my own place, I ended up going to take over Baker and Spice from the founder. And then that ended up being the next kind of like 5-6 years, where we took it from a couple branches in Dubai to almost 30 branches across the Gulf. And that was an unbelievable boot camp that whooped my ass for the next 6 years. And taught me everything that I thought I knew previously about restaurants, and tons of stuff that I didn't know before. That brings us to March of this year, where I exited and was lucky enough to join some really, really smart people that have been involved with food and tech and hospitality, and sort of the intersection of those things, for an investment fund that's focused on hospitality. Everything and anything from supply chain logistics to gourmet grocery stores to tech, to digital concepts and ghost kitchens and activating those spaces, to thinking about how to get supper club entrepreneurs up and running, which I think is a really interesting space right now. And I think all three of us have seen the rise of the supper club this year in a really special way. And that's sort of my experience. But my focus in terms of the restaurant business and hospitality has always been scaling and operations, like blueprint to brick. That's my focal point.
So on that point of scaling and working at so many different levels from both sides, and grafting and earning your place in this market, what makes Dubai a very different canvas for creating something unique versus anywhere else in the world? Why do you think this is a hot point here?
You know, I think we've worked through a lot of the evolutions that happened in other countries. Mm-hmm. But they're happening to us now, and they represent what maturation cycle we're at in terms of the restaurant business. So I think we started off with the big box franchises, and before that, back in the old days, it was a lot of the American fast casual franchises that, like Fuddruckers in the Gulf, is like a beloved brand,
Yeah,
an American
and also
brand.
Johnny Rockets, I remember, very glamorized.
Right. And what I find so interesting about brands like that is in the States, they are commercially unsuccessful, if not completely extinct. But here they have such a beloved status. And I think we went from sort of those types of fast casual brands that people grew up with into some of the more high-end franchises that we've seen dotted all around the Gulf. And I think that's very much so moved into the next wave, where you saw a lot of stuff like More Cafe was doing super well then. Jones the Grocer was doing super well then. And that was sort of the start of the convergence between fine dining and casual. And then now we're moving into what I would call the chef-driven mono product phase of the life cycle of restaurants, which is very much so indicative of a matured restaurant economy. And a lot of that is offset by Corona, or even hastened by Corona. A lot of that is changed by the tech space, the digital space, and what ghost kitchens allow passionate people who want to cook to get them up and off the ground and running soon. But I think fundamentally what's unique to the Gulf, and to answer your question, Dubai, is it's very trend transient. Right. Very, very trend transient market, which makes it actually quite difficult to create a movement rather than a moment.
In what way would you say there's a bit of more free reign here, or less so?
I think you don't have as much free reign as maybe you want. I love, to a great extent, how many people want to be in the restaurant business in the Gulf. That's something I don't necessarily see.
Do you think it's because of that expectation that it's easy to do, it's easy to break into, but it's hard to, there's difficulty with staying power?
Absolutely. And I think Tom and Luma will also talk about this as well. But I think people romanticize the hell out of this business in such an unhealthy way. And like, you know, they've seen Cocktails, or they've seen one episode of Gordon Ramsay, and they're like, I can shout and, you know, make cocktails and do that thing. That looks really cool. But I love, you know, I think one of my, and then I don't want to take the mic too much because I'm already sick of my voice already. But one of my favorite things to hear is when people are like, I have an amazing retirement plan to open up a restaurant. And I'm like, that's your retirement plan? Are you fucking mental? Your retirement plan should be to do nothing.
Yes.
You should sit on the beach and do nothing. You want to do what 97 hours of your week? That's your retirement plan? Your retirement plan should be to eat. Your retirement plan should be cook or be a customer of restaurants. But I think we've romanticized how easy it is. There's been a couple outliers that everyone thinks are highly reproducible. The number of times I've heard people be like, well, if Zuma can do it, and I'm like, yeah, and what? Right? It's a tremendously over-romanticized experience. The truth is that restaurants are very mechanical, are very much so in the granular and not necessarily in the covetable things. And I think that's very unique to this market.
Tom, you're itching to say something. You're thinking, you're scratching your head. Well, why do you think it's like this? Why do you think that there's this this very loose but willing want to get into the industry? That there's a kind of delusion of grandeur behind it.
Well, you know, that's the thing. If you do very well, there is good money to be made. But it's very, very hard to do very well. It's very, very hard to be very unique. And it's very hard to understand what people actually want and are prepared to pay money for, because it's all a value proposition. Mm-hmm. And no matter if you're in the top end or in the bottom end, you've got to make sure that you're producing value for people that is unique enough to be able to compete against the competition. You know, Dubai has changed so much over the last 5-6 years. Like, so much has changed. Restaurant economics have changed dramatically, for good or for worse, in a few different ways. One of the main ones has been, you know, the rental side of things, which has been crazy because we've seen such fluctuations in the rental market and property market. And there's been so much surplus of property on the market where, you know, I've seen the big development companies chase people they know have cash, and not dupe, but, you know, suck people into bad leases. And that has caused so much drama, so much chaos in the restaurant industry. So I think you mentioned 11,000
Yeah, I
restaurants.
think it should be over 12,000 now, because that was 2 years ago.
I'd be very interested to see what the average lease would be. I'd be very interested to see which ones of those restaurants are actually making money, and which ones of those restaurants are run by people that actually have experience in the market, because most of them are investments for people. So I think you're seeing, like, at the moment, it's very difficult for new entrants to come into the market, because one, it takes a lot of money, takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of business acumen that I didn't have when I first started out, and I've had to learn, the very hard way over my, almost 7 years since I started my first business over here. It's taken me a long time to learn, and I've made mistakes, plenty of mistakes, and I'm still making mistakes today, and I think that I'll never stop making mistakes, but it's the only way you learn, the only way you grow. But I guess the most important thing for me at the moment is, like, I'm loving watching what is happening in the Dubai restaurant scene, because it's clearly flourishing. Some people are flourishing. It's clearly changing every single day. There is, at the moment, it's like one of the most opportunistic times for the restaurant industry, because there are so many operators out there that are now closed. So there are opportunities to get into new restaurants. There are opportunities to get really cheap leases. There are opportunities to get, like, cheap fit outs. And they could be in areas where you least expect. Like, at the moment, like, me and my team, we're searching for needles in the haystack. We're not interested in the big developments, other than obviously the GIFC and JLT. We have some big new restaurants coming up there next year. But there are opportunities right now, if you're smart, to figure out how to grow your business. And I think that there is, it's now one of the most opportunistic times that we've had, I think, since I've been in the UAE anyway. So I can't wait to see what happens next year.
In light of COVID, though, how can restaurateurs, people who want to step into the industry, future-proof themselves from another wave like this pandemic or whatever else might follow? How can people safeguard themselves and sustain?
You can't. Like, you can't safeguard yourself from a global pandemic. It's been the toughest year of my life, without doubt. The most emotional year, the most emotional time for my employees. There hasn't been, much in the way of support, really, from the banks or institutions or whatever. And so, which is maybe the right way, maybe the wrong way to go about it. But I personally love what the government have done in terms of allowing us to come back out and reoperate again. In Australia, it's been a totally different mindset. They've been saying, well, we're going to go down to 0 cases. Here, they're going to, like, okay, well, if we're at 1,200 a day, it's manageable, it's fine. Which is, I think, the right way to go about it. And it's definitely helped us as a business stay alive, which is, like, very difficult, because most businesses here are just not going to survive. And it's been an incredible time to work with your employees, to figure out how to restructure your teams, how to make sure that they're fairly compensated, how to make sure that even with revenues dropping by like 40%, still, like, across the board, our revenues are way down. Like, it's like, people think, oh yeah, everything's back and everything's good. No, it's not. We are trying to keep everybody in my company alive, trying to keep our futures alive.
Yeah.
And so you have to, like, try and get the best of both worlds and figure out how to, like, keep everybody happy and continue to, stay positive and figure out a way to flourish when this thing is over, because the thing will finish. COVID will finish and it'll be over soon. So anyway, what I'm saying is, like, it should be a positive time. It should be an opportunistic time, and we should stay, everybody should stay ahead of the curve and trying to be smart about this time and be strategic. So anyway.
Luma, you mentioned Good Burger. This was part of navigating the pandemic. How were you dealing with the changes, and how are you adapting to survive?
Well, when we had to close down, we had to close down. That wasn't a choice, it was something we had to do. But we made the decision, my husband and I, to launch Good Burger at the best time. And we did it as, like, a secret brand. We've never done virtual brands before. We focused solely on Maiz for the last 4 years. But my husband Haider has been making these burgers for ages, and he thought, it's like a mono brand, like Andre said, and it's simple, easy. let's just put it up on these delivery and platforms and the aggregators, and let's see if it works. And it did. It stuck. And for us, it was a little bit different, although we do have a big local demographic. At that time, when we had moved to JLT, they weren't really coming to that side of town, and they weren't following us because we were mobile for 3 years. So they would always follow us. When things started opening up and takeaway was made available, people can come and pick up, and we were driving, orders around town, trying to build our community and just, basically show our customers and our followers that we were still here. We weren't going anywhere. We would keep going until we, can't go any longer. It really helped. And as soon as dine-in opened back up, like now on the weekends, thankfully, we have queues every weekend for Good Burger and Maiz. And we're able, interestingly enough, to tap into both of those demographics and move over to the other brand as well. And that's helped us. I mean, we had some very serious conversations where, I had just had my baby. We had just opened up JLT, and, my husband, Haidar said, we're probably not going to make it. You understand that, right? I just want to be clear. We're not going to make it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's a pandemic. Like, how the hell would we make it? We just opened. We don't have investors. We bootstrap, everything since day one. But yeah, you just keep on trucking. And, like Tom said, it is an exciting time. The government has supported us, and they have made things a lot easier. My friends in the States, in Chicago, half of them, their restaurants are still closed down, or, every day the laws are changing there. They're going through lockdown. So for us, being persistent has helped us, continue as a startup.
You mentioned that now on the weekends, and I'm sure pre-pandemic now, you have lines waiting because the lifestyle here is such that food is a focal point. Right? How does that added pressure keep you on your toes in a way that it might be just different elsewhere in the world? I think because here the go-to entertainment is where we're going out to eat. How does that added pressure of needing to be constantly on your game keep you on your toes?
Quality is very, very important to us in our brands personally, like the two brands that we have. Like, ingredients are very, very important to us, and we make that a big point in the way that we run our business. And yeah, when you're introducing a new brand into the market, whether for us, whether we have a little bit of experience or we don't, the pressure is always on, and we want to deliver, and we want to make sure that they enjoy this experience just as much as they enjoyed the rest, especially when it's a new demographic. You never met these people. You've never talked to them before. They're just coming to give you, a chance when it's a very competitive market. There's, hundreds of other places for them to go, drive all the way to the other end of town for in JLT, and come and wait 30, 45 minutes for your burger or for your tacos. So my husband and I you will always find us there every weekend. So Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, we're working, whether it's front of house or back of house. And we have one shop right now. So for us, we want to, try to be as hands-on as we can and be able to tackle those issues or any problem or anything that we face hands-on right away. So that's basically how we deal with it.
When you conceptualize a restaurant and you bring it into fruition, what happens in that space of time between the initial creative meetings to the first months of operations? Are you doing focus groups? Do you have contact with consumers? What does that process look like when you're starting from day dot, from zero, from scratch? What does that process look like from here to here to anyone?
I mean, I'll mostly a lot of crying,
Yeah.
right? You just kind of literally, mostly a lot of tears and horribleness and not sure and self-doubt. But I think, look, to say that this is not like that expression, oh, it's not personal, it's business, that's a total load of shit for us. This is very personal for us. In fact, you're talking to three people who are effectively owner-operators, right? Or who have been owner-operators, who are currently who are physically on the floors of our restaurants. So the idea that it's not personal is total garbage nonsense, number one. So understand that in the process of incepting a concept, what we're cooking, the whole premise of why we think we're going to be good at this business, despite every statistical piece of evidence showing that you're not going to make money in restaurants, is because we fundamentally believe that the stuff that we like to eat and the way that we like to be treated, that there are lots of people like us.
Right.
That is like a fundamental, universal idea behind every restaurant, is that someone at some point was like, I really like this, and I feel confident other people will like this too. 95% of the time, restaurants do well when operators create a restaurant that they love and they understand this isn't going to be for every single customer out there, but I believe that there's enough of me out there for this to work.
Yeah.
And that is how you create sustainability over time. That's how you create, instead of a moment of movement, instead of a moment, a movement.
Yeah.
What people get trapped in often, and this is such an important time period to focus on when you're going through the brand ideation and getting into it, is that a lot of restaurants start off and treat themselves like they're launching a product, like a marketing company. But there's so much that doesn't translate. So we spend the number of like consulting clients or whatever that I mean, they're like spending so much time on the flooring or so much time on the ceiling, or they invest so much into the hardware and not the software of the experience. So I think fundamentally, what are you going through that time period when you're incepting a restaurant is, how do I want people to feel when they walk in? Which is such a weird, amorphous idea, right? Like, how do I want people to feel? When I close my eyes, do I want to hear that magic kind of soundtrack in the back of a laugh and a wine glass and a fork hitting a plate and the bell from the kitchen, right? It's a romantic experience. It's art. It's poetry in motion. So how do you create that? How do you like write a formula for poetry in motion? That's all that keeps us up all the time, right? And this fundamental idea of like, okay, well, are people going to show up tomorrow? That's what you're thinking about on the day before you're open. You're like, holy shit, are people going to come?
Yeah.
Because like a reservation, let's be honest, in Dubai means nothing. A reservation is like, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. I know Tom's laughing at that. Tom knows it's the truth, right? Like reservations are not taken seriously. We can't, by the way, and this is another thing, for anyone listening, if you're ever in fear that your credit card is going to get charged by a restaurant, they can't do it. It's total nonsense. You can't charge over the phone. So give out your credit. I give out credit cards. I'm like, please go ahead, let it rip. They can't charge you. So there's no guarantee that someone's going to show up. So when you're going through the process of creating a restaurant and you're going through this idea of like, all you're thinking about is, how do I want people to feel and are they going to show up? That's like 95% of everything that wakes you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And you're like, oh my God, did I turn? And then like the other stuff is like, oh my God, did I turn the fryer off? Like, did I lock the door? A lot of it is like stupid stuff like that you would never think about. Like, Tom, how many times have you gone home, whether you were working or whether you were the owner, you're like, shit, did I lock the door?
Yeah, a lot.
Like a lot. That's the stuff that's going through your mind. But fundamentally, the reason we go into this business is because we think that there's people that want to eat and drink and gather like we do, right? Yeah. That's all it is. It's fundamentally all it is. Because if you think about it, most of the restaurants that we know nowadays, people have gotten so good at cooking, especially post-pandemic, they can do it at home for the most part. So they're kind of paying to hang out with you. Yeah. Right? Like, they're paying to hang out with us.
Yeah.
So if we don't make ourselves fun to hang out with fundamentally, they're not going to want to hang out with us over and over again. At some point, everyone's going to realize that vodka soda tastes the same everywhere, right? Like, no one's like, oh, you got to go to this place. The vodka soda there is so good. That's not a sentence that comes out of anyone's mouth ever. They're paying to hang out with us. So I think creating an atmosphere that makes people want to hang out with us, incepting a restaurant, incepting a concept that fundamentally taps into a deep form of hospitality is a very difficult algorithm to write. But if you try and be a restaurant for everyone, you will 1000% create a moment and not a movement. If you try and cook the stuff that you really believe in, that fundamentally you want to eat, the stuff that you feed your kids, cook the type of meal that you want to cook when you know your in-laws are coming over for the first time.
Best behavior food, basically.
Right. You know, like, it's like literally run the restaurant like your grandmother's watching.
Absolutely.
I mean, my grandmother would be very disappointed in some of my behavior, but run the restaurant like your grandmother. Cook like like your in-laws are coming over. And I think 95% of the work is kind of done for you. The other 5% is just how to catch, lightning in a bottle. That's it.
Well, here's the thing. I think when it comes to originality and coming up with something exceptionally unique, I think consumer intelligence now is sharper now more than ever because of Instagram and how much more worldly and traveled people are. Against this hyper visibility and this kind of gimmick culture in restaurants, how do you sidestep that but then still stay on trend? Isn't it quite a difficult dance?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. I want to use the example of some of the rules that I used when we first opened Tom and Serge in the beginning, because it was obviously I had way less to lose then. So if we failed, it was a major disaster, but it wasn't going to be the end of me. I was very young, in 24, 20. No, how old was I? 27, I think. I was 27 when we opened Tom and Serge. 28, 35 now. So yeah, back then it was about no matter what, right? So that's all you have to do is be unique and get noticed. Mm-hmm. So there's two major rules that I use anyway. One is be unique and get noticed. The other one is make sure that everybody around you can find a way to get invested in that idea, and that they should believe in that idea. But the first one's a more challenging one, because you've got to at least have the idea for everyone to be invested in it. And once you have that idea and you have that vision, then you can sort of come up with it. But one of the things that we did at Tom and Serge was, number one, choose a location that, if anything at all, it's unique, right? Which is one of the problems that I see with a lot of these mass developments around, and why shopping malls can be so hard, is because you just choose a box next to all these other people and it's very hard to stand out. Mm-hmm. But if you choose a location that is truly unique, at least you've got one thing going for you, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing, and back in the day when we opened Tom and Serge, back in the day, it sounds like it was 20 years ago, 7 years ago, Instagram was a new thing. We used Instagram. Our content was our people, tattoos and cool, trendy, people with individual personalities. That was another thing. We didn't have uniforms. I think we were definitely one of the first restaurants in Dubai to not have a uniform. We had aprons, but our staff could wear whatever they wanted, so that they could, at least be themselves. Yeah. Talk to the customer like they're their friend, not talk, so the customer doesn't talk down to you. No name tags, serving coffee at 63 degrees, no soy milk, no alterations to food, closing at 4 o'clock. These things piss people off.
No.
A lot. But at least they told their friend, oh, you went to this place and it was crazy. But at least it created a talking point, so people went down there to go and check it out. So that was my first sort of time of actually realizing, wow, if we really do something different and unique, you can really create the lightning in the bottle. But you don't intend to create lightning in the bottle like that. You don't, like, that is something that I think is impossible. It's just, it's an amalgamation of a load of different ideas and risk taking that you have to do as a business owner anyway. Every time you start a business, you're taking a massive risk, no matter what it is. But as long as you can find a way to keep taking more and more risks and make them manageable, that's where I think you start to figure out how to be profitable and make money. So it's about manageable risk, I think. That makes sense.
In the context of the UAE, you mentioned location being super, super important, but sometimes even the location isn't enough, and you can't make miracles happen. If something is not good enough, it's just not good enough. But what would you say in terms of, that, where do these verticals meet? The location, the landmark, the gimmick, the price points. What is that kind of freak of nature, amazing restaurant? What does that look like? I mean, you mentioned that you guys did something totally, you bucked the trend. You didn't have name tags. You closed that but then people cotton on to that, and then that becomes the mainstay and therefore not unique anymore. So how do you constantly evolve yet not lose your original identity that was the secret formula?
Really, really, really hard. And I struggled with that as we became more successful and opened more restaurants and became more, like now I'm sitting in my head office now, we have 20 employees up here, like everyone's doing their job. It's a big engine that's sort of trying to roll, and to keep the personality is extremely tough. But to be honest with you, I don't spend much of my time here. I spend pretty much 95% of my time in the restaurants working. You go into any of my places around the city, and you'll find me in those venues. It's where the lifeblood of the venues are. It's where I can work with my employees who are absolutely amazing, especially through this bloody hard time at the moment where everybody's hurting. It's like, yeah, you've just got to be in that business all day, every day to continue to make sure that they grow. Because if you stop, they die.
Luma, Andre, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I agree. For me, I worked in tech. I've been here for 12 years now, and I worked in tech for 8 years in startups and building businesses and for everyone else. But I knew since I was a kid, I've always wanted to get into food. So my husband and I made the decision that, we needed to run our own business. We weren't going to just step in on the weekends or at nights. We needed to be there all the time. And if we were going to call ourselves a family business, we need to act like one. So that's when, of course, I quit my job, and every day you would have found me on the truck as the cook or the cashier. And that continued during the entire time until now, every day and night and weekend. And our customers are our friends, and we have thankfully been able to create a community within our customers and within the guys that footfall to our place and have followed us around throughout the years and don't mind driving from Abu Dhabi or from, Ras Al Khaimah or Sharjah. And I think that's what's helped us, because every week they ask, who are you? Like, what do you do here? Why are you always this little girl that's bouncing around and you're talking to this person and you're in the kitchen? And like, what do you do here? I get asked that every day. I'm like, oh yeah, I just come help out sometimes, or, I'm just the background and just checking up. And they do get really astonished and they get surprised. And it's kind of refreshing for them to know that, they can come and see Haidar and I every day. They can talk to us. They can get to know us. And that's exactly how I grew up, going to my local restaurants for breakfast and for tacos and for coffee. And that's kind of what we wanted to build. And we found personally that really did help us during this really crappy time.
Yeah, I think the personalization and making the experience as porous as possible across, between the waiters and the chefs and the owners, so that there's that collective experience. Is that something that you would agree with, Andre?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you wouldn't have to look so hard. When I was running Baker and Spice, there was like the Baker and Spice feed, which was like nice curated photos of lovely grilled vegetables. And then there was literally me running into my kitchen every morning, like
I met
messing
you at Baker and Spice in Bahrain. I remember you came to our table and asked how the food was. Yeah. And my mom was like, why aren't you asking me specifically? Because you asked me. And she's like, am I not young enough? I remember that so well.
That definitely sounds like a question I probably navigated poorly. But I'll tell you honestly, like I think, Instagram has been such a powerful tool for us to reach out to as homegrown brands and to show the behind the scenes thing, which I think actually people really respond to, right? So I think people do like the polished accounts, but they also kind of want to see how we get up in the morning and what we do with our lives and the sort of like the mechanics of running a restaurant. I think people really responded, at least, or I noticed that people responded a lot more to Baker and Spice when they saw the fact that there was a baker that had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that like that croissant that you just ate in literally 67 seconds took, a lot of time to make. They want to see how the sausage was made. You know what I mean? Like they want to be part of that process. And I think, social media has been such a tremendously powerful tool. Sorry.
I was just saying, you just said they want to know how the sausage was made. I think that sentiment was the complete opposite maybe 20, 30 years ago. People didn't care.
Totally. And I think actually even of my parents' generation and their parents' generation, I think the style of hospitality has changed, where it's like, like even the way we build kitchens, the idea of an open kitchen 20 years ago was insane. It was wasn't a cool thing, right? No. And now you have restaurants that have really leaned into that to create immense personality. I mean, like the idea that Tom and Serge closed at 4 o'clock was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. This is a country that doesn't get up till 11 o'clock for breakfast.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was crazy. But I'll tell you one thing though. There are a couple rules that you can't break. So like, if I try and summarize what I'm understanding the question to be is like, how do you know? Which is a tremendously hard, completely subjective question, right? But how do you know what risk to take? I'll tell you one risk you can't take.
Andre, you're a bit muffled. Your speaker might be compromised. No, I can't hear you. This is a good point. We need to hear you. Try again.
How about now?
Perfect.
How about
Go.
There's a lot of things that you can compromise in terms of the way that you decide to take risks.
Yeah.
And I think that's fundamentally the question that we're asking ourselves is like, what are the appropriate risks to take? But there's one thing you can't risk, and I think all three of us will agree on this. You can't mess around with parking. Like parking is a major, tremendous issue. Like I loved the fact that Tom's place was in Al Quoz, which was industrial, and it was totally a way to bring very much so a spirit of, Australian coffee culture into Dubai, right? And into the UAE. But I wonder, Tom, do you think it would have worked if you didn't have so much parking in the beginning?
No, probably not. But that was
like, yeah, I fundamentally, I had a restaurant downtown in the Boulevard called Kismet, which I closed at the beginning of the year, which was super heartbreaking, but totally necessary. And, one of the hard parts about that is that I thought that from a location perspective and the way that we wanted to take risks, for many different reasons, was perfect. So I thought it was ground floor, it was licensed, it was standalone, it was small, it was super centrally located, but there was no parking. And that was a tremendously difficult issue. And I opened that restaurant literally with one idea. I did not want to be another burrata restaurant. Like that was literally, I was like, I'm not putting this on my menu. I'm not going to do another burrata restaurant. I really wanted to do the type of food that totally was just I felt like didn't exist. But I think the risk that I took was the idea of accessibility, is that you can take risks with your style of service, with your interiors, with your hours of operation. But there's certain things fundamentally that you can't take risks with to make yourself, so to speak, pandemic proof, or to make yourself something that's going to be sustainable over time, is access and the ability to pivot and agility. And one of the things that I think homegrown operators have the ability is that if Tom decides tomorrow that he wants to do Chinese food and turn his restaurant to a Chinese restaurant, that's it, he can do it. And there's nobody, he can do it by himself. He may alienate some customers, he may win a ton of new customers in, but he can do it. And the first time I really understood that was what Tom did with the first Ramadan where you did the roost. Do you remember that?
Yeah, roast, yeah.
And it was like everybody was doing these immensely wasteful food buffets, which drive me up the wall, okay? It seems like the worst time to waste food ever would be something like Ramadan. And totally not in the spirit of the theoretical idea of everything to me that it stands for. And you had someone who's like, I'm going to do a la carte, I'm going to do something casual, and I'm going to do something that's gathering focused. And he turned his restaurant to rotisserie and like a barbecue, which had been previously very much so cemented in people's minds as a breakfast spot, as a breakfast and lunch spot. And he activated a different part of his business. Totally the same example, I think, with you, Luma, where it's like you wanted desperately to be the host of a restaurant. And it was just hard to impart the beauty and authenticity of Mexican food and the warmth of Mexican food, unless you could physically get people inside and do it and be a part of that. So I think, what risks you're willing to take completely depend on the type of food that you think people want to eat and how they want to feel when they walk into your restaurant.
We have 15 minutes left, and I want you guys to give me one kernel of truth as advice to offer to restaurateurs who want to break into the business on how to navigate the landscape. And then we're going to go into Q&As because we've got quite a few questions. So each of you, one line sentence, really snappy. What advice would you give? Don't all jump up at once.
For me, we get asked a lot about food trucks. Just yesterday, we got asked about a food truck. Who do you recommend? I want to open a food truck. Don't do it. Just don't do it. There's no need to open up a food truck anymore. It was sexy. It was cool for a little bit, but get a kiosk, test it that way. Do it at home now. Apparently, you can, or use a central kitchen, but don't get a food truck.
Okay. Tom?
I think I said it before. If you stop, you die.
Keep the momentum going. Great. Andre?
I'm going to do two, if that's all right, but very quickly. The first is, the question that I get asked a ton is this idea of like, do you think I should open up one of these digital concept or ghost kitchen concepts? I like cooking, but I'm not full-time in restaurants. There's no difference between launching a digital brand in terms of the time it requires from you and opening a full-scale thing, right? It's the same amount of time. So if you do want to do it, it's great. And the other thing is, there are really only two secrets
that you really need to understand intrinsically if you want to work in the restaurant business. And it's sense of urgency and perpetual motion. That's it. Okay. Those are the two things. Everything else you can learn. I can teach anyone else everything else.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to dive straight in because we've got quite a few questions and I know they're going to chew up a bit of time. Right. We have an anonymous attendee who's asked, do you think the influencer bubble will fizzle out?
God, I hope so. I'll speak for all of us on that.
Definitely. Better.
God, I hope so. Oh.
What aggravates you so much with it?
They've never worked in restaurants. They've never, ever. If you've waited a table once in your life, I'm interested in your opinion. Yeah. And if you pay for your food, you have a right to an opinion. But if you haven't done those two things, who are you? You're no one. You know nothing.
My perspective is just don't give them the attention. Like if you don't, I want to say this. I'm in two minds about it. The ones that you don't think deserve the attention, don't give them any attention. That's for sure. Just don't even reply to the DM or don't reply to the email or whatever if they're asking for something free. But there are definitely influencers out there that have great value. You can argue that having a great chef come to town who no longer works in a restaurant or whatever, you know, I don't know, I'll give you an example of George in Australia, one of the most famous chefs in Australia. If he came out to Dubai and came to my restaurant, and I would comp a meal for him in exchange for an Instagram post. Are you kidding me? He's huge.
Tom, to be fair, the nice thing is he wouldn't ask for it.
Yeah. No, he wouldn't ask for it, and I wouldn't ask for the post either. But I'm sure he'd be kind enough to do it. So I think there is take here, and it's just about managing it the way that you want to manage it. There is definitely positives to come out of influencer culture. I disagree with the fact that there's not, and because it's totally up to us. So just don't let it upset you. There are bigger things to worry about, I think. You know.
I personally think that there's just too many of them, and it just weeds. It's just a lot of weeds, you know. And I think the ones of repute, the ones who give something and contribute and have some kind of effect, they're great, but they are unfortunately numbered. And I think there's a huge sense of entitlement here in the influencer culture, massively. Do you think generally prices for F&B are inflated in Dubai?
I'll take that one. I think that is a difficult question to answer because I don't think the prices are based on generally always the cost of food. I think it's mostly about inflated rents, which have pushed the price of the selling price up. Sure. So if you look at the 11,000, 12,000 restaurants in Dubai and only 2,000 or 3,000 of them making money, it's because all the other ones have their costs out of whack. Doesn't mean that they're serving stuff that's overpriced. It just means that their costs are out of whack. Yeah. I think that inflation has definitely increased the cost of food here, but that's normal. I think that the customers dictate what the cost of, what the selling prices are. Because if they don't want to buy it, they won't buy it. If it's too expensive, it's too expensive. So it's all a value proposition and ensuring that if a customer is going to pay a price, they're not just paying for the food, they're paying for the entire experience, which is a lease, which is staff, which is interior design, which is furniture. I think it's fine, to be honest with you. I think that it's where it should be because if it was lower, it's because the customers demand it to be lower. It's all about supply and demand.
Mm-hmm. Food Sheikh wants to know what global food movement has changed or influenced the F&B industry the most in the last 20 years, apart from delivery.
Apart from delivery, I like how he did that. That's a good one because that would have been such an obvious answer. I'll say plant-based meat alternatives has been massive, 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 massive.
I agree with that. It's huge, massive, massive.
Yeah, there's been alternatives to these really like carnivorous options now. An anonymous attendee has asked, how do you define what fine dining is? What is it that makes it fine as your ingredients are all the same quality?
I don't mind taking that one too, but I'll do a quick one. So fine dining traditionally, for the longest time, meant it was a pairing menu. So you would do it's not an a la carte menu. This is the actual definition of it. So you would do either a 5 to 7 course meal, and that would be paired with a recommended beverage by a sommelier. And that would be it, versus a la carte, which traditionally means you can order effectively anything that you want from the menu. Now, fine dining, and that word has been bastardized heavily in the Gulf because it's just become anything expensive. So for example, Zuma is not technically fine dining. It is premium something, but it's not technically fine dining. So to me, the definition of fine dining very exclusively is, a coursed menu with pairing.
Yep. All right. Have your marketing agencies / teams ever been able to successfully create more than a moment for you? If not, why?
For me, definitely. The strategies because for me, it's just my husband and I. So that we are each other's leaders and partners. So recently we started working with a new team, and their experience with F&B, their experience with strategy, with one of the things I always say when I meet new teams or new potential agencies is I want to do crazy shit. I just want to do stuff that is.
Oh, we've lost her. That crazy shit. Luma, we've lost you. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question. How do you promote sustainability in your workplace?
I'll take that one then. Sustainability has been a massive part of our business over the years. It's been very tough to find. Is everyone hearing me okay, or is it just Luma that's frozen?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. No, it's been incredibly tough. Sustainability is it's so broad because there's so many different possibilities of making your business sustainable, and considerate of all things to do with environment and whether it's choosing the right fish to use that's not undersized, or it's not overly caught. There's this whole thing in the UAE about local fish. We don't use any local fish that's not farmed, purely because of the fact that the local fish population in the UAE in the last 30 years, and I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure the number is like 95-96% depletion in 30 years, which is a staggering number, and it's purely because of overfishing. And like hamor, which you still see on Carrefour shelves, and I know some big restaurant groups still use the wild stuff. Don't use it. It's almost extinct. That is a huge thing. And second, so I'm really, really, really aware of that stuff. I used to go fishing a lot here, and Oman, where I used to live as well. And it's heartbreaking to see some of the fish markets and where they overfish. Anyway, that's one of the things. Second thing is that last year, I think we became, the first F&B company in Dubai to totally eradicate single-use plastic, which we've done across all of our restaurants, which has been amazing. But I was shocked to see that not many other people did it. To be honest with you, I don't know why, but I thought it was an obvious thing. I thought that a lot of people would start doing it. Yeah, people were doing straws, and we use paper straws now and whatever, or avocado seed straws or cornstarch straws or whatever. But that's pretty much the extent of it. So I'd like to see more companies go completely single-use plastic free over the next year.
Definitely seeing it growing and growing as a trend, for sure. I mean, as a consumer, I'm seeing people and brands and restaurants doing their part in that. What do you think about the rising trend of home cooks who are starting small cooking businesses from home? Will it last? What are the pitfalls you see?
Luma, take it. You got cut off.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think it's interesting. It's something that for me, when I first wanted to get into F&B, I thought, why can't you experiment here? Why is it only available to certain people? So I think it's definitely interesting. It's exciting. It helps, but I don't I don't see how you can scale a business through your kitchen, no matter how big your kitchen is. I just don't find that to be physically possible, especially because you're going to have to hire staff and you're going to have to grow. So maybe they'll be able to grow into cloud kitchens or to work in central kitchens, which I really like as well. But I think it's about time that it's available here as well, just like every other country.
And I want to do one final question because we're almost running out of time. What do you feel is wrong with hotel restaurants versus standalone restaurants? Why have hotels not been able to succeed as well as unique standalone F&B concepts?
I'll jump on that one as well. Again, like, long answer, but I'll try and make it short. The point is that like, it's obvious for me to just say, oh yeah, because they're not restaurateurs, they're hoteliers, but it's not all about that. I believe it's about development and property and restaurant or hotels being built resort style. And when you build a hotel resort style, you build a hotel with 7 or 8 or 10 restaurants in it. And if you bring in a chef from outside, or you get a concept developer to do you a restaurant here, no matter what, you cannot put enough time and effort into that restaurant to make it work. No chance. Yeah. I think the world-class restaurants that do exist here and are going to exist here in the future are going to be chef, owner operated for sure. And the chefs are going to be here in the kitchens. They're going to be working in their kitchens and grinding and grafting away to make sure their businesses are successful and in the top 100 in the world. And I believe that they'll be here soon. I think Three Phil's got into like the top 50 ones to watch list or something. Nick and Scott have done that. Those guys are still in the kitchen. So it exists here, but I think the hotels will definitely suffer in terms of quality and consistency.
Andre, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental answer why hotel restaurants fail is because hotels don't care about them. It's an amenity. It's never a focal point. They're in the housing business. They're not in the food business. And that's a huge generalization. I'm sure there are restaurants and hotels that have done better, but there's no soul really in hotel restaurants. They have to do everything for everyone, and often not of their own choice. So to get 3 or 4 stars, there's certain things that you need to fulfill with local municipal requirements. You need to offer an Arabic breakfast plate. You need to have 3 services a day. You need to be able to do all of these checklists. You need to have the club sandwich, the hamburger, and the pasta with pink sauce. And the problem is when you try and do that, it's going to turn out crap, right? It's never going to be the same thing as a passion project driven chef owner on the floor operated restaurant, right?
I think that's it, because we've just hit the 5 p.m. mark, so I'm going to do a clean sweep out of it. But guys, thank you so much for, first of all, those questions were amazing. Thank you so much, everybody who participated. Thank you to Tom, Andre, Luma, and Forward Comms for organizing all of this. I think the biggest takeaway is to sustain a movement rather than a moment is to be as immersive from top down, bottom up. So thank you guys so much. This was really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. See you.
Have a great day. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.